So my name is Zandie Brockett, and I've been living in Beijing for about a year and a half now. And my day job is I work for Lu Xiaodong, who's a contemporary Chinese painter, as his studio manager. And I'm also an independent curator working on a few projects of my own, curatorial projects and exhibitions, but also in trying to develop a new model at the moment that brings together emerging artists and emerging curators in a way that will enable them to produce projects that can reach a larger target audience within China. Because I find that the people that are prone to participating in the arts and going to galleries and museums and kind of challenging themselves with these questions at hand, is a very limited population. So, really trying to find a model and a way to um, kind of bring things into more of the yellow cube, if you will, exiting the white cube, really bringing the arts into an environment that is parallel with the lives of the Chinese, and not necessarily trying to educate them, but just trying to make it more readily available so that they are able to come into contact with it and to have it enrich their lives. Because I find that right now, a lot of Chinese don't necessarily partake in the arts or really care to, because they think that if they don't have money, they shouldn't be, affiliating themselves with something that is of such high value. And secondly, they just don't understand it. So why are they going to challenge themselves and make themselves feel uncomfortable in an environment that they don't understand? They have their other things in daily life that they would much rather continue doing, and so it's a matter of finding a way to like kind of bridge that gap so that the understanding becomes or a little bit easier for them, or if you will. The current Beijing and Chinese environment, in regards to like the art environment, I don't think anyone really knows what's next. I think that's kind of what everyone's struggling to achieve. And I think that there's really this underground dialogue about what is next. I think everyone understands that, there are these institutions that exist, whether it is these non-for-profit galleries or these commercial institutions, these kind of like oxymoronic um, organizations that are existing. They're existing in the state because they are existing within the environment that is in China, whether it is the government and the current audience that um, they're trying to relate to. But they're also using Western ideologies and models of art institutions, whether it is the non-for-profit museum or it is the commercial gallery or it is an alternative space. I don't think that a population should have to participate and engage themselves in the arts. I think that, I have definitely grown up in the West, and I find that, growing up in the West, whether you are interested in the arts or not, you kind of have it surrounding your childhood, whether it is going on field trips to museums or, having art class once a week or whatever it may be. You kind of are more familiar with the arts. I don't think that it's necessary to be part of everyone's life, but I think that in general, when it kind of infiltrates a society more, it is able to like build and kind of maintain and preserve a culture more. And I find that preservation of culture is something that is really important in this current environment in China. I find that, because the West is so rapidly infiltrating China with their ideologies and with their culture and with their ways of living and their standards of living, that China is very quickly forgetting their own cultural past and their own traditions. And I think that this is really important for me, at least. I'm half Chinese and my father's a white American. So I find that it's really important for the Chinese to preserve their culture, because I see it. I see them losing it, and with losing the culture, they, I guess they're kind of losing themselves and their identity. You know, it's like, what is the Chinese identity anymore? It is so much of a Western identity, because as they become more globalized and as more they become more modernized, they really modernize towards a Western standard. There is no Chinese modern standard of their own. This expensive modern posh shop it's influenced by the West. You know, it has that Western standard, that Western feel, that Western like level of comfort, you know, that doesn't exist in China. Yes, maybe perhaps it has a, you know, a, a Chinese exterior to it, but inside, in the heart, it's really it's imitating the West. You know, it's wanting to be this Western. Um, it's wanting to emulate Western belief and society, um, to have those material goods that the West has. I find that well, all of the Chinese art academies, they teach in the realist style. But the realist style which they teach in is the Soviet style, which stems from French realism. You know, so it's funny because it comes from a Western tradition, the way in which all of these artists are being trained. But at the same time, the way in which they're being trained is very technically. To produce these very technically mastered paintings or drawings or sculptural pieces, you know, they're able to execute their medium very well. But they're not really taught to think beyond um, beyond produce producing that medium. I think that I'm speaking very generally, but I think that oftentimes you come across artists that are very good at replicating things that they see and are able to uh, replicate this, um, you know, contemporary Chinese art looking um, piece or something. And as a result, a lot of, you know, a lot of things that you see, especially when you are rummaging around 798 or parts of Chongqing, um, you're really not seeing true, um, really good work that is, you know, able to blend not only the technical talent but also this idea and this the creativity and kind of the um, conceptual. I think that, you know, these are like the two spectrums. You know, you have China on one end with the very well technically skilled artists, but then you have in the West the artists that are like overly conceptual, and that as a result of becoming overly conceptual, they kind of lose their craft and lose the quality in producing their craft. So I find that, you know, um, I think I'm totally deviating from your question, but I find that the Chinese artists, um, you know, it depends. I think that there are some that have gone abroad, and that have, you know, Western influence in terms of becoming, you know, thinking about their work in a more round perspective, you know, thinking about their environment and those that influence them, and, you know, their inner self and like why they are producing their work. Um, I think that for the most part, artists in Beijing, not for the most part, but a large part, they haven't really discovered what it is, why they're producing quite yet. Um, you know, what is it that's inspiring them? What is it that they're after? I find that, you know, again, being very general, that as this kind of contemporary Chinese world has developed, there has been this boom, and artists kind of see it as a means to um, as a means to the to an end. Um, but you know, that obviously does not make a great artist in my mind. Having Chinese artists having Western thought embedded within their work, I think that yes, some do. Um, I think for the most part, the ones that are really pushing forward, though, are really commenting on their own experience and their own life in China and the rapid development of this country and culture and society and how it's kind of impacted their friends and their lives. And um, I think they kind of stay towards um, discussing what's going on in China, really. So I think Beijing is in this really interesting state right now. It's still very young and it's still developing. I think that, oftentimes people compare Beijing or China rather to the West, and that, especially when it comes to the art scene, they say there's a bubble here and that it's popped and it's kind of unstable and whatnot. But the thing that they don't remember is that China has this gap when the West culturally developed quite significantly. From the mid to early to mid 60s through the 70s was the Cultural Revolution, and it kind of stopped all cultural growth and development in China. And in the 60s and 70s, this was a very important time, especially in the U.S. In terms of growth for the art scene, the way that artists think and practice, the development of the gallery system. Um, and so I think that Beijing is still, it's in this interesting state where it is all of a sudden growing very quickly and it's being influenced by the West. But it still has its own history and its own um, traditions that it is embedded within. So it's trying to find this place where these two can come together and coexist in an equilibrium state. But it's not quite there yet. So it's rapidly changing and developing, and ideas are growing, and people are kind of trying to figure out who they are, both Chinese living in China, but also foreigners that are living here and in this very unsteady state.